Hey, and in this video, we're going to be talking about the 5 biggest mistakes that we see when it comes to deploying your army in the game of 40k. Now at Vanguard Tactics, what we try to do is help people become more confident at the game and give them clarity on how to improve. Now that's hopefully something that we can really help you with today, is give you that clarity on how you should be deploying your army. So let's go over the 5 biggest mistakes that we see in the game. So the first and probably the biggest mistake is not considering the terrain in your deployment zone. So first of all, what you want to be doing is looking at what terrain features are giving you obscuring benefits, which ones you can physically hide behind and stay outside of line of sight from your opponent's armies, and just making sure that you're using the terrain to your advantage to make sure you're actually protecting your more vulnerable assets. Now often you might think actually this unit's quite durable, but you're always better to completely keep it out of line of sight or keep it behind obscuring. So in order to do that, what you need to do is first of all assess the battlefield and look where the firing lanes are from where your opponent might be shooting you from, and then that way you can kind of get a good idea and assessment of the battlefield to make sure you can use terrain effectively. The second mistake that we commonly see is not considering your command phase. And obviously the command phase, most of your key units and characters have a 6-inch aura, and often you may find yourself having units near or in a certain area where maybe you wanted a command ability on them. So again, make sure you're planning that out even before you put those first units down. Because obviously if you're not in those command ranges, then you're not really going to find that your turn's going to be as effective as you want it to be, and often you can find yourself getting misplayed or out of place due to the actual footprint of your units and your squad sizes. So make sure you really practice your deployment to see how big your footprint of your army actually is. The third mistake that we see is not considering your opponent's threat range. So your threat range of an opponent's, for example, shooting phase might be their movement with an advance move if they can advance and shoot, and then the total distance of their range of their weapon. So that is called a threat range. So make sure when your opponent puts down a model or a unit that's got a really good damage dealing capacity from a gun perspective or a shooting perspective, you measure out that threat range and make sure you're behind it. And if you cannot be, then make sure you're using terrain instead. Now, threat ranges for charges are very similar. So you measure out the movement, the advance, if they can advance and charge, and then 12 inches, that's what you can declare within. So again, you can be, oh, I'm just outside of 24, so then you can't make that 12-inch move and then 12-inch charge. So again, make sure you're using threat ranges appropriately. The fourth mistake that we see is not setting up your first turn. And this might sound really basic, but again, you really need to drive this home through repetition, and it's all about considering what's your game plan, what's the mission plan, where do you want your units to be moving to make sure that you can really develop yourself in terms of your turn 1, and then if you don't really have many firing lanes or firing opportunities or charges on, really then set up that turn 2, but it all happens from the deployment phase. So consider where you're deploying your models, because you need to know where you want them to be turn 1 or at the end of turn 1, so then you know where you're starting for turn 2, where really most of the action is probably going to happen, especially if you're going first. The fifth and final mistake that we see is not considering the secondary or primary missions. So again, where are you placing your units on the battlefield to make sure you can move out, maybe disembark from a transport, move, and then obviously perform an action in a particular area or quarter of the battlefield. Where do you want to move and raise a banner? Because obviously if you advance, you can't do that. What objectives do you want to get to? So again, measuring out your ranges to move and then get to that distance is going to be crucial to make sure that you can thoroughly plan out your turn effectively to make sure that you can achieve those. So that concludes the 5 biggest mistakes for deployment. I hope you enjoyed that video, and if you want to find out more tips and great strategies on how to get more confidence and clarity to the table, then please do check out the Vanguard Tactics Academy. All the links are below, and we'd love to see you enroll as a student.